Hi, and welcome to SP Live. Today we meet with Dr. Eduardo Dvorkin, President of Y-TEC, EPF or YPF Tecnologia, and discuss oil and gas technology innovations in Argentina. My name is Nils Korgerson-Loh. It's my great pleasure to be your host today. SP Live is in part made possible by sponsorship from the SPE Foundation. And if you are new to SP Live, check us out on social media, #SPE Live, or find us on spe.org. And if you are returning to us, then welcome back. It's always great to see you. Check us out, comment please on the social media chat. Tell us where you're watching us from. We love to know. Now, today's SPE Live is a continuation of our CTO and Directors series as we talk with senior executives in oil and gas companies, getting their perspectives on technology, innovation, industry challenges, and the way ahead. Argentina has a long history in oil and gas, dating back to the early 1900s. Production has largely been from conventional reservoirs and maturing assets, but the last half decade or so has been from a rise of unconventionals and the vast shale resource that is the Vaca. Now, Argentina and Latin America oil and gas experience featured in SPE's recent virtual annual technical conference, ATCE. If you missed it, you can still register and watch all content on demand. There's some really great content there, so please check that out. Now, Argentina, like many other oil and gas provinces, has had a tough year. And even prior to COVID-19, the Argentinian industry faced some headwinds, both political and technological, as it looked to develop unconventional resources and grow recovery from maturing assets. Furthermore, the ever-present energy transition places additional pressures on our industry, the environmental footprint, sustainability, and delivery of clean energy. Now, technology provides many solutions to these types of challenges, hence our discussion today with Dr. Eduardo Dvorkin. If you have comments and questions you want to share with us and ask about technology, the role of oil and gas, particularly from a Latin America and Argentinian perspective, then please type in your questions. We will be reading your comments and questions as we go. And if you have colleagues that want to catch up with us, repost us, tag us on social media, and send out to your colleagues and your networks. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest today, Dr. Eduardo Dvorkin, President EPF Tecnologia, or Y-TEC. Dr. Eduardo Dvorkin is also a professor of computational mechanics at the Department of Mechanical Engineering at the University of Buenos Aires. A long and illustrious career in engineering, technology, and academia. Most noted, I suppose, for his work on finite element modeling. He's had a long and illustrious career. He's included being director for Tanara Sederka Research Center, visiting professor at the Department of Mechanical Engineering at Stanford University. He was also a member of the board of directors for Argentina's National Agency for Science and Technology. Indeed, a very illustrious career. So Eduardo, welcome to SP Live. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you very much, Niels, for your invitation, and thank you very much for being interested in what's been going on at Y-TEC.
Absolutely, yeah, and we'll get onto that just shortly. Just a quick mention to our audience, fingers on buzzers and keyboards, please share questions and comments. We'll be following you as we go. So, Eduardo, Y-TEC, many people are not familiar with it. What is it, and what is its role in Argentina's innovation, technology, and energy communities?
Okay, let me start by the beginning. Y-TEC was started in 2012, and that was a very, very interesting move, because up to that moment, Argentina had a very, very powerful scientific sector with very little impact on technology. From that moment on, Y-TEC was started as a corporation. I mean, it's Y-TEC Corporation, but 51% of the shares are owned by YPF, which is the national oil company, and 49% of the shares are owned by CONICET. And CONICET is the Argentine Agency for Science and Technology, which in some sense is not exactly the same, but in some sense is equivalent to the National Science Foundation in the US. So basically we have a company that is a technological company having on one side the main industry in our country, which is YPF, the main industrial company in our country, and on the other side, CONICET. And this is a very, very important move that was made in 2012.
Okay, so that's a very interesting concept to evolve. What was the reason for bringing these two entities together to help with innovation within the energy industry in Argentina?
Well, you put together the side that needs the innovation. That's YPF. Oil companies, as you know, oil and gas companies, they are always requiring innovation. And at that time, we were starting with, in Spanish, vaca muerta, which is our non-conventional oil and gas reservoir. And if you are going to have a non-conventional reservoir, if you are going to do hydraulic fracturing, of course, you need quite a lot of innovation. So there is the need on one side, YPF needed the innovation, and there is the potential of the scientific sector, which is basically inside CONICET, because CONICET is a very large organization, and the researchers of CONICET work not only on the CONICET institutes, but also in the Argentine universities. The researchers are affiliated with CONICET. So basically, it's a network of researchers that covers all the country and all the different disciplines. So we put together the ones who offer the innovation and the ones who needed the innovation into one company.
Very good. So obviously a very unique setting. I don't know of many other sort of similar settings, maybe some in Norway that I can think of, but not identical. How big is the organization?
Okay.
How are you housed?
Yes, let me show you some photograph. So here, I don't know if you can have a look at them.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This is our building. It's a brand new building, very nice, very impressive building that was built very close to Buenos Aires, not in Buenos Aires, but very close to Buenos Aires. As you see, 51% of the shares YPF, 49 CONICET. Now, this is another picture of our building. We have 13,000 square meters, 1,000 equipments, 47 labs, and 12 pilot plants. We are going to go with some of those pilot plants afterwards. You see, we have 60 projects in our portfolio, 33 patents awarded, and some just in being awarded, 15 technologies in the market, and we are 266 persons in Y-TEC. 66 of them, they have PhDs. And we have also, well, 64% are men and 36% are women. But as you see, we have inverted the situation. There are less women than men, but in the managerial staff, there are more women than men. So basically that equilibrates the position. So CONICET, we have people who work for CONICET but are working inside Y-TEC. We have 67 persons. Some of them are researchers, some of them are PhD students, some of them are postdoc, etc.
Okay, so that's Y-TEC.
Yeah.
Like I said, a very unique setting. So, what are some of the challenges facing the Argentinian oil and gas industry? I mean, you've mentioned the vaca muerta. There's also a lot of mature fields, so promoting production from those mature assets. So how is Y-TEC working to address those needs?
Yes, we have 5 technological programs. The first of them is innovative chemical substances for the oil and gas. That's to say, for example, I have been at a meeting right now, before starting this conversation, where we presented to YPF the development of a new fluid for fracturing. You know, the HBFR, which is high viscosity, HBRF, high viscosity reduced friction, which is the kind of fluids you need not to have a lot of friction in the pipelines. So we are working on that. Then we have another technological program that deals with the intelligent, quote, quote, equipments and tools. The environmental program is another program. Then we have a program where we develop new oils, but also new alternative energies. For example, we have two big programs. One is regarding the lithium batteries, and the other is regarding the use of hydrogen for moving things. I mean, and at this time, we are not only an oil and gas company, but we want to think of ourselves as an energy company. And then we have all the technologies required to know the under the soil, that's to say, the reservoirs. Let me
just interrupt you there, Eduardo, for a moment. We had a really great question from the audience on LinkedIn. Henning Hansen, he's saying, I'm an inventor with more than 50 patents on wellbore and subsea technologies. And he's asking, how would he or other people in his position work with Y-TEC? How does he connect with people?
That's very, very, very straightforward. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you in a few minutes some development we did with MIT, which is my old school. But people who want to work with us, they should contact us and they should propose a project. And we are always eager to start new advanced projects. So basically, that is very simple. You can send me even to me a mail, and we will be contacting you to discuss the possibility of having a joint program.
Very good. And I think it's actually on your website as well. There's like a sort of application form, right? If I remember rightly. Yes. So people can actually apply through the website. So very good. Now, you were talking about some other technologies, I think, when I interrupted you.
For example, we are doing, of course, enhanced oil recovery, all the usual technologies in an oil and gas company, enhanced oil recovery, new energies. We are doing a lot of services to the industry, not only to YPF. We are able to do services to any other oil and gas company. We are working with the downstream. We are working, NOC means non-conventional. We are working with the non-conventional. We are working in production and workover, etc. But let me show you this. Oh, this is a very innovative program. For example, the question is, what happens if I try to do fracking without the sand, without the propane? Of course, you cannot do fracking without the propane. I don't know if all the people who are listening know about the propane. I guess yes. But basically, when you make a fracture, you want to introduce a solid material, which is like a sand, known as propane, just to keep the fracture open when you finish pressuring the crack. Okay. Now, you cannot do it without propane, but propane is a very large cost because the sand that we use as propane is not found nearby Vaca Muerta, but it's found very far away. So we have to transport a lot of sand all over the country just to be in Vaca Muerta. So basically, we are doing a new development where we introduce some chemicals inside the fracturing fluid, and the propane is formed in situ. You see, for example, this is with calcite. This is viewed through a microscope, and the propane is here. You see these bars, which are like stalactites and stalagmites, but in a microscopical size, they are formed in situ. So this is just at the laboratory level. We are working this with a CONICET lab in Bahía Blanca, which is a city not too close to Buenos Aires. So this association with CONICET helps to spread the R&D through many places in the country. So whoever has a good idea, we invite them to work with us. And look this. This is a simulator of hydraulic fracturing that we developed together with an MIT spin-off company, Parasim. And you see, for example, here, this is finite elements, and we are making the crack. And on this side, we are looking to the pressure in the fracturing fluid, because it's, of course, a coupled problem between the fluid problem and the rock mechanics problem. And you see here we have a fracture that is going to meet a natural fracture, which is this one. And in this case, the fracture gets arrested. But there are some other cases where the fracture, in this case, you see the fracture comes here and it's not arrested, but it's offset and goes through the natural fracture. But there are other situations where the fracture just crosses the natural fracture. That's to say, it's not that we are going to, this is a very important result for the industry, but in this way, we can validate our developments. You see here is the fracture, the line color is the fluid, and the distance from here to here is the fluid lag, which was described in the literature many times.
So what's the, I mean, there are obviously many frac simulators in the market. So what differentiates this one? I mean, I note that fluid lag. I mean, I've not seen that on many simulators. That's very interesting to see. But what are some of the other differentiating things around this simulator?
Yeah, two things. The first of all is the finite element technology. Let's see, based on what it's called, it's not important the scientific name, but based on what it's called this continuous Galerkin method, we are able to do massive parallelism. Because, you know, these problems are usually involve a large amount of finite elements, so you have to go parallel. So we have proven, just by doing trial and error, that our code scales. That's to say, if I spend 1,000 hours and then I go, instead of using one processor, I use 1,000 processors, perfect scaling would be to have, instead of 1,000 hours, 1 hour of CPU. Now, our program scales almost as theoretically predicted. Now, this is one thing. We can use it in very large problems because it's very good scaling in parallel processing. The other thing is that most of the available codes, you have one code for simulating fracturing and another code for simulating production. Now, with our code, we simulate fracturing, and then using the fractured domain, we can simulate the production. That's to say, we have not to translate the fractures from one code to the other, but always the same code.
So this is still at a research tool level, I assume.
No. We are at this point, we are working with YPF. I mean, the people from YPF are posing to us different questions that are being answered using the code. At this point, we are using as a production tool.
Okay, very interesting. So other operating companies, say based here in the Permian, in Texas, in the US, they could approach you with projects and ideas about using this type of code?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. Okay. So that's a very interesting innovation that has very practical sort of applications to a problem that's plagued unconventional resources for a while, is sort of how to model and simulate both the fracturing and the production. What sort of other innovations are you developing? You mentioned some there. I saw earlier that you mentioned some on the sort of mechanical side, so sort of monitoring, pumping. I think also I saw on your website something about membrane technology. What is that?
Yeah. Well, this is in the environmental side. I mean, in many places, downstream operation, upstream operation, or even in the gas stations, you need to separate from the fluid you want to dispose. You have to separate the oil, the hydrocarbons from the water. So we have developed a semi-permeable membrane that it comes the flow of hydrocarbons mixed with water, and then it takes the water on one side and the hydrocarbons on the other side, so you can have pure water on one side and have the hydrocarbons to be disposed with a much less volume to be disposed. Now, we are also developing a system based on nano bubbles that we can use to dispose the hydrocarbons mixed with water. So we have two systems basically to dispose the hydrocarbons mixed with water, because in every industrial application, you have the problems of the fluids to be disposed. Now, you see the advantage of being part of CONICET. A few weeks ago, a scientist coming from another Argentine city, Santa Fe, she came to us with a bacteria that could do things. First of all, it could eat the hydrocarbons. Let's put it eat the hydrocarbons. On the other side, with those hydrocarbons, she could produce a plastic, a bioplastic. So we are trying that, and we are very much involved with the cleaning of the environment. So that's a very important question for us. How to be very efficient disposing all the things that are disposed in the normal oil and gas production. Now, I would like to also to put the finger on two very, very specific developments. One is the lithium batteries. At our building that I showed a few minutes ago, we have an experimental plant for producing lithium cells, small lithium cells. Well, our government wants to start using the electrical buses. And if you are going to use electrical buses, a big idea is to produce the electrical buses in our country. Why not? And to do that, you have to be able to produce the lithium batteries. So we are going to build, together with the University of La Plata, which is a city very close to our building. I mean, from La Plata to Buenos Aires, we have 60 kilometers. And from our building to La Plata, we may have, I don't know, 10 kilometers. So everything is quite close. We are going to build a plant where we are going to produce lithium batteries, still in a very small scale. We want to be able to motorize 10 buses per year during 4 years, so to be able to acquire expertise on that, and then to call some either public company or private company, whoever wants, to say, okay, here you have the technology, we want to produce lithium batteries.
That's very interesting. We could come back to the lithium batteries, and you mentioned hydrogen earlier.
Yes.
I just want to just go back a little bit to, you've talked about the water-oil separation. So, and also there's some questions about the frac simulator again. So but first on water-oil separation, does your technology, how does it deal with very saline, salty water, brines? Because that's a big problem in the unconventionals in the Permian in the US, and I imagine in Vaca Muerta, there's going to be a lot of salty water being produced with the oil. Is that something you're addressing?
Yes, we are addressing that because, as you said before, it's a problem for all the oil industry. And, for example, how to deal with the flowback water. and things like that. So basically, at this time, we are studying using that salted water in the fracturing fluid. That's to say to reuse it, and we want to evolve from the actual practice, which is to dispose from that water in some wells, which I don't think is the way to go. So we are now working very hard to be able to use, for example, for the fracturing fluid, the salted water.
Yeah, yeah. That's. I think a lot of companies are looking at reusing it for the fracturing fluid, but ultimately there is a much bigger volume of water produced than what you can use in fracturings. And disposal wells, as you mentioned, is you can dispose of it, but also there are limitations on how much you can dispose. So there's always this question of what do you do with the water.
Yes, personally, I think that we should evolve as an industry, not only YPF, as an industry to treat that salted water. I mean, disposing in wells, it's not a safe way to keep on going for years. I mean, something has to be done on that regard.
Yeah, no, interesting. And hopefully the industry will move forward on that. Just to go back to your fracture simulator, we had a couple of questions. So first one is really about the differentiation of your simulator versus others. So Edwin Ephraim on LinkedIn asked, how different is this simulator compared with the kinetic shale from Schlumberger with the Delphi environment? Are you familiar with this?
I have never used them, but I know that they exist and I have read about them. Well, if you want to compare, you need two things. First of all, you need to go to the nuts and bolts of the simulator, and I'm quite sure that our simulator is big for parallel computing. Well, I'm sure the other simulators are also developed thinking about parallel computing, but we should compare them. But the very important point developing in-house simulator is that when you develop a simulator, when you use a simulator, you should use an open software. That's to say, our people at this time are able to come to us and say, okay, I would like to introduce this and this situation in our simulator. So basically, one of the best things in developing a simulator is being able to adapt the simulation to the new requirements of the industry. One point. Then parallelism, of course.
Yeah. Okay. So that's as you say, it's that parallelism that is an advantage in your code and speeds up the calculations.
Yes.
Turning again to, please. Yeah.
I always tell to my students at the university, try to avoid using black boxes as simulators. So basically now I'm in the position to avoid using black boxes.
Yes, I think that's key to any simulator, is to understand what the calculation is, right? And where the limitations are on the calculation. Yes, absolutely. Otherwise you don't understand the results that you get back. Are they true? Are they false? Are they giving you false positives? So yes, absolutely. Another question we had from the audience about the this calcite alternative to fracture propping that you mentioned. Just trying to scroll back through the questions. The question was about the permeability. Could you say anything about the permeability of this?
Well, that's the big question to be answered. We are doing a lot of tests about the permeability of this, and of course, you have to make tests where you are compressing the calcite using the same kind of compression you will find in situ. So we are working at that, as I said before, together with Plapiki from the University of La Plata. Sorry, Bahía Blanca.
Fascinating. I mean, I can imagine sort of the complexity of that. As you say, you're injecting a fluid under pressure to open up a fracture. It has to crystallize whatever you're trying to deposit inside the fracture, and you also have the problem that pressure changes in the fracture away from the well or an injection point. So very complicated, very fascinating.
Two more things, one pro and one con. The good thing is that we are able to use the CO2 that is inside the well. The bad thing is that these kind of composites are still very sensitive to the pH. So in some gas wells, you have a low pH, let's say 4.5 or things like that, and then you may dissolve it. So basically, it's not to be used in places where the pH is very low.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, but interesting. You mentioned CO2 as well, and in situ CO2. So, is that a potential for? Could you use CO2 from CCUS, for example? If you want to dispose of CO2, could you use it now as a tool?
Well, you see, disposing CO2 is one of the projects we are now involved. And I should say something. When I started working as the president of Y-TEC, some people came to me, they were in the modeling group, and they told me that they wanted to be part of a consortium, of an European consortium, where you have a number of big R&D companies, especially from Norway, that associate themselves to develop some places, to develop the technology to capture the CO2 and basically to store the CO2, in caves or things like that. I am very interested in that, and I told them to just join the consortium and bid, because there was a bid in the European Union, and we won the bid, and we are going to receive from them like 1.5 million euros for this project or something like that. But it's not the amount of money which is really important, which is not very big compared with our budget. The thing that is being important is that I want to go into the technology of being able to store CO2 when you capture it. So we have developed, we are in that project, and we are working very hard on the technologies for capturing CO2.
Yeah, again, great to hear that, because obviously it's a big question mark over the industry and society in general, is how do you capture and then how do you store the CO2, and particularly how do you store the CO2 safely over a long period of time? It's not just a matter of pumping it down a well and forgetting about it.
No, you pump it to a place where it's secluded, but then you have many mechanical problems in the rock, and we have to deal with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just picked up a question from Abdul Hakim Mazere on LinkedIn. What do you think about CO2 fracturing? So actually using the CO2 gas as a fracturing medium.
Yeah, I have read about that. We have never used that, to be quite frank. And I think that it's something that needs to be explored. Sounds good, but we have never used that.
Yeah. So I just want to turn back again, because we've been talking a little bit about environmental footprint, sustainability in oil and gas, CCUS we've just talked about now. So, and you mentioned lithium batteries earlier as a very different element to the work your Y-TEC is doing. You also mentioned earlier hydrogen. Tell us a little bit about the work you're doing on hydrogen.
Well, we are just starting with hydrogen, and we started a consortium. The name of the consortium is H2AR, AR for Argentina. And there are a number of companies, big companies and small companies, that for some reason or another, they are either involved or want to be involved with hydrogen. Some of them, for example, are steel companies that use hydrogen as part of their process. Some of them are companies who want to explore the use of hydrogen for motorizing, for example, trains, or for motorizing, not urban buses, because that is not in our focus right now, but for motorizing big trucks or for motorizing intercity buses or things like that. Well, we started the consortium. We are now putting together all the requirements that people have about hydrogen. And basically, we have a limited amount of researchers. I mean, we cannot put all the company to work on hydrogen, so our effort will not be huge, but we will put some research effort trying to focus on those places where where the industry has an interest. That's to say, we are not going to define the focus of the consortium from the R&D point of view, but we are going to focus on what the industry needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about in terms of hydrogen? There's been a movement now to use hydrogen as an energy storage medium. So basically converting gas or oil to hydrogen and then using it, or even water to hydrogen to use it as an energy storage. Is that something you're looking at?
We are trying to really to push the green hydrogen, because as you know, you have the green hydrogen, which is made using electrochemical processes, and the energy is produced with, for example, wind energy or eolic energy or things like that. Then you have the hydrogen that is produced by reforming gas, and then you have the black hydrogen, which is produced contaminating the environment. So basically, the green hydrogen is on the center of our interest. Of course, it's not very much developed up to now, but we are going to drive in that direction.
Yeah, that's good to hear. So again, it's sort of another interesting innovation using the technology that you have at hand, or the knowledge and experience you have at hand to evolve new technologies. In your role as a professor, what do you say to your students about the energy transition and the role of oil and gas in the future and the challenges it faces?
Yes, I think that when we teach in the university to the engineers or to the scientists, to the future scientists, they have a lot of knowledge, of basic knowledge. And it's up to us who are in some decision positions to drive that energy, that knowledge into one direction or the other. I want my students, I teach finite elements, computational mechanics. Of course, the first thing I want to have is my students having a good knowledge on computational mechanics. But then I give them talks about the usage of computational mechanics on real life. That's to say, okay, you are going to be an engineer and you know all these things on computational mechanics. In our field, you are great. But let's talk now what engineers do with this tool. And I think we should have the responsibility for introducing the alternative energies as part of the things that they think about. That's to say, I want my students, when they leave the university, to have in mind the alternative energies, and if possible, to find a job in alternative energies. Of course, it's not possible for everybody because there are not so many alternative energy jobs right now. But I think that the students should have that field in mind.
Yeah, very good. And so also just touching on the students, and now I'm thinking about particularly women in engineering. You mentioned at the beginning the diversity and the balance that you have between women and men within Y-TEC. How do you encourage women to take up engineering subjects at university?
Well, you know, some of our governments in the past, I mean, when we had a lady who was our president, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, she gave a special fellowships for women who, I mean, first she gave a special fellowship for people who wanted to, either women or men who wanted to study engineering, because it's the same nowadays in the US. We don't have so many young boys and girls who want to study engineering. So you have to promote engineering between all of them, men or women. Then there are also some extra fellowship for women who want to study engineering. It's evolving very slowly. When I was a student at the University of Buenos Aires in mechanical engineering, I think I didn't have any any girl who was having the courses with me. Nowadays, when I teach in my courses, you can find 10% women, 15% women, not too many. But for example, when I was at MIT in the 80s, when you walked along the infinite corridor at MIT, most of us were men, I mean. You couldn't see so many women. And nowadays, when I go through the infinite corridor, when I visit MIT, you have a very, very important amount of women walking along the corridor. There are some careers in engineering that have historically more women, for example, chemical engineering. In chemical engineering, we have more women. In mechanical engineering, perhaps it's the career where we have the least amount of women. But we should always keep on encouraging women to be engineers.
Yeah, absolutely. I can agree more with that. Yeah, we need more women in engineering, and as you say, it's the future. In terms of being an engineer, you have so much possibility in terms of future careers in so many industries, not only oil and gas. One final question around E-TEC, and again, young professionals, graduate engineers. Are there possibilities of working in E-TEC as a sort of intern or through sort of studentships? How can young engineers, graduates work at E-TEC?
Well, there are two ways. One is if she or he has the engineering degree, he can apply and we can hire the person as a technologist. And he then joins or she joins a research group and works there. The other way, which is very interesting, or the other two ways, one of them, a person can come to Y-TEC and, for example, get a fellowship to do his or her PhD with us. This is something that I'm very careful because you know how is industry. If you want to do a PhD, you have to have a topic that is going to be active during 5 or 6 years. I mean, it's the usual time for doing a PhD. Now, in industry, it's not so easy to be able to predict that a project is going to be active 5 or 6 years more. So here we have to be very careful. And the other way, which I encourage a lot, if young persons coming to Y-TEC to do a postdoc stage. So this is the way I personally encourage a lot. So you have 3 ways. Just a technologist in our team, a PhD student, or a postdoc.
Okay, very good. Just a sort of final question, really, again, thinking about the innovations around E-TEC. You've mentioned hydrogen, lithium, batteries, the activities you have in oil and gas. Looking ahead, what are some of the things that you're really excited about doing at E-TEC in the next year and the coming years?
Yes, there are 2 or 3 things. First of all, trying to go further with the new technologies and developing new technologies for hydraulic fracturing. This is very important for the country and for the company and then for us. And there is a lot of room for new developments and for improving, based on chemicals, based on computational mechanics, etc. Second, the alternative energies. I am pushing a lot to get a very important situation in the production of alternative energies. And I think this is the same in many of the R&D centers in the oil industry. Many years ago, British Petroleum started to name itself as Beyond Petroleum or things like that. So basically all of us are doing this. Lithium energy seems to me closer than hydrogen. I mean, we will go first to lithium and then we will not stop developing things with hydrogen, but of course it's on a second position. And then something I didn't, then the environment thing. I mean, we should be able to reprocess all the things we dispose today, to reprocess it and just to make a safe operation. We want to have safe operations of the oil and gas fields. and of course at the refineries also, because YPF is the upstream and the downstream. And last but not least, we are doing a lot of contributions to the agricultural technology. We are developing new products for agricultural, for soybean, for wheat, for corn, etc. Because we have all the chemistry there, so we know how to do it. So basically, these are the fields where I want to have the biggest impact in the coming years.
It's fascinating to hear, and really excited for you and Y-TEC about the coming years. So thank you very much for sharing all your views and your insights to the industry, and telling us about Y-TEC today. It's been really interesting to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your invitation, and of course, it's a pleasure to be here with the SPE.
Eduardo, it's a pleasure to have you here. So thank you very much. It's great to have you here. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks. Okay, guys, just to quickly wrap up here for all of you. So thank you for watching, first of all, and thank you to the SPE Foundation for sponsoring SPE Live. Hot on our heels today at 10 on the hour, Houston time, on the hour everywhere else, is an OTC Live, Opportunities and Challenges in Frontier Basins and Emerging Offshore Areas. So that's our sister channel, OTC Live. You can find that on otc.org or just search OTC Live on social media. That's a really good OTC Live coming up on frontier basins. So particularly on the topic of Latin America and some of the African states, those frontier basins there. So that's all offshore technology. Tomorrow we have SPE's first E-session, integrating fiber optic sensing to optimize the completion of unconventional wells. Find that on spe.org/online education. Next week, we have a really full program of SPE Live, so you can catch us talking about flow assurance and subsea tiebacks, thriving in the new energy landscape, and produced water management. Audience, you have been terrific as ever. Thank you very much for participating and chatting with us as we go. Look forward to seeing you all next week. Asha, our producer, thank you very much for today's show. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. See you all soon. Thanks.